We continue on Game Time. Doozy of a doubleheader coming up Thursday on TNT. Giannis and the Bucks against the Raps, and then you've got the home debut at Oracle for Boogie, who's been the cheat code thus far. The streak at 11. He gets Embiid. That should be fun on the floor. We bring you on the floor and are set here on NBA TV as we look at our standings in the East, and the Bucks and the Raptors at the top of the list. We'll see how they tweak themselves, if at all, guys, between now and February 7th, as we try to gain as much court coverage as we can, considering the three of us can all see each other eye to eye, and it normally does not happen. So I don't know what we call the shorties only. It's new. Turner, get on it.
Take that, 3D.
Let's get into the East. And when you think about this matchup, do you think, Sekou, this is the conference final in the East, if you had to choose it today, Bucks and Raptors?
That's tough. I still think Boston is the most talented team top to bottom in the Eastern Conference. So I'm hesitant to go ahead and anoint this as the conference final. But if it is, I'll take it. I mean, you talk about a fantastic matchup of styles and teams and how they've come together early on the season. Mike Budenholzer's had an unbelievable impact on the Bucks this season, just unlocking what all those other guys can do, in addition to pushing the right buttons on Giannis's game and allowing him to go to that next level. And then you can't speak enough about what Nick Nurse has done in Toronto, integrating Kawhi Leonard, but also that team thriving without Kawhi in the lineup. To me, has been probably their most impressive trait so far this season. But we got a lot of time left. I don't know if I'm ready to anoint these two teams just yet. I need to see a little bit more.
And the way Kyle's played, right? 9+ assists, second in the league. Coach, both impressive in their own right for the different ways they've succeeded to this point. How do you see Bucks and Raptors in terms of where they sit in the East now moving forward the rest of the way?
One of the reasons I might hesitate is because I think one of the top four teams, and I'll throw Boston in there, I'll throw Philly in there as well, one of them is going to do something right before the All-Star break. Philly has come out and said, we need one more piece. We need another perimeter shooter. So will they be able to come up with one, get one? So if somebody adds a key piece, that can really turn things around. I feel badly for Indiana, who, based on what they did last year in the playoffs, if the injury had not happened to Oladipo, they might be surprising some people.
Remember this about Philly, for those who look for big names at the deadline last year, maybe the biggest pickups that nobody talked about, Bellinelli, Ilyasova, got them both for practically nothing. The Warriors have given up practically nothing, 11 games in a row. So here is what is coming ahead for them. And regardless of what the names are, guys, on this schedule, I mentioned Boogie is the cheat code. Watching him the other night, Sekou, and getting a chance to sit there and call that game, the difference maker he is, added to that group of shooters and spacing, being able to literally bully anyone he wants into the block, maybe not Embiid, who we'll have here. How much are you impressed with already what you've seen from Boogie and that element in this offense?
Tremendously. And really what you didn't factor in about Boogie's game is that he would be this comfortable physically so quickly in terms of getting into the lineup. Steve Kerr talked about starting him before anybody even brought it up. He's like, hey, when he comes back, he's starting. We're putting him out there. We're going right at it. Now you see why. He's ready to play. It wasn't like he needed 10, 12 games to get a rhythm. He's in a rhythm already. And physically, if he's healthy and capable of doing what he's done so far, you go ahead and start saying Hail Marys for the rest of the Western Conference, because nobody's going to be able to touch this Warriors team in the playoffs if they continue on this track.
Somebody said to me the other day, well, who could beat them 4 out of 7? I said, Coach, who could beat them 1 out of 7 if they've got all of those? So we look at the games that are coming up. If the Warriors play to their capability now with Boogie in tow, can anybody beat them other than themselves having a night where they make mistakes?
Well, we know that the NBA game is crazy. On a given night, one team really has it going, another team just can't make a shot. It happens that way. But to go along with what Sekou said, beyond the physical part of Boogie coming back, to me, the only thing that's going to really hurt that team would be if he doesn't get it, if he loses track of this is the piece I am and how I have to fit in to this world championship mix. And I think, all this time he's been sitting and watching, he realizes I can really add something to this team they don't have, but I don't want to try and add too much because we're pretty good.
Well, trying to defend them right now, a complete nightmare, clearly.
Yeah, and I think back to the Western Conference Finals last year when they were up against the wall on the road in Houston. They had to have, the kind of performances that they got out of all their key guys to move on and get back to the finals. This is a group without Boogie now that has all of the DNA you need to get back to the finals for the 5th straight year. You're throwing Boogie on top of that. You're throwing arguably the best, most physical, most talented big man in the league on top of that mix. How are you supposed to combat that if you're another team in the Western Conference?
You might need an all-star team. Segue. Let's take a look at where we are. This is, I just want to know who LeBron's going to pick. Can we tell you? I mean, that's going to be some mama drama, but this is a pretty good group, I would say. The year that Paul George has had, obviously Steph. James, you can catch the Sekou MVP ladder at Mondays. Is that right?
Fridays.
Fridays.
Come on,
Fridays.
Fridays.
I only get it on Monday. Fridays. You can get that. You look at the reserves, and these are how we see the group. We all agree on most of the players. I want to get to a couple where we've got some differences. When you look at Tobias Harris, Sekou, now I've been pushing this. Now, he's a Long Island native, as am I, so maybe that's part of it. But he has been the constant glue for that team, really since the trade was made a year ago. How legitimate of a shot do you think he has, considering the numbers, to make the team, even if you and I think maybe he deserves it?
Yeah, I think it's tight because the glut of talent in the Western Conference and the fact that a lot of people will tell you Lou Williams is the guy, if you're going to pick a Clipper to put in this game, would be the, be the player that you would select for that spot. I just feel like you got to reward a guy who's played as consistently well as he has. Early in the year, when they were in the number 1 spot in the Western Conference and everybody's feeling great about him, it was in large part because of what he'd done, and he's continued to play that well. I don't think his game has dropped off at all from what we've seen from him earlier in this season.
Coach, out west, Utah has played way better than where they currently are seated. Now, their schedule was the most difficult, gotten easier. We're seeing that even out. A lot of people say Gobert should be the all-star. You've got Donovan Mitchell, who's been brilliant as of late. Why should the Spider be in the game?
The turnaround with their team, and as you mentioned, in the beginning, what a brutal away schedule. They had played, 10 or 12 more away games, and they had home games. You knew at some point it's going to even up. And their winning has gone right along with Donovan's improved play. He started out not the same guy that he ended last season as. People going like, how good. He got it back together. He realized whatever it was that was not right with him early on, part of it being on the road, he got back in front of his home fans. He felt better. The team felt better. I felt it was because of him taking over and getting back to that next step above where he was playing early in the year is the difference for their turnaround. And I think Gobert could be there also.
Let's go to the east side, see where the starters are for the All-Star game. And look, Giannis, El Capitan. You've got Kyrie, Kemba. So good to see that. This will be such a great ovation for him. And hopefully they push and get him an opportunity to go get that MVP at home. You look at the reserves. We agree on a lot of this, including some of the names in the wild card spots at the bottom. And I think Beal is probably going to end up getting in and should, which we've got him in. Vooch is a guy. Let's talk about him because Sekou, there's twofold with Vooch. One, clearly deserves to be. Do you think he'll make it? Two, what uniform will he be wearing shortly after? Because, right, those are the two questions with him right now.
Sure, and I certainly think he's played to the level where he has earned a spot on the All-Star team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You can't look at the productivity, the way his game's evolved, the impact he's had for this team, and discount all that he's done. But you're right. He's going to be one of those guys who's in the crosshairs at the trade deadline, no question about it. There are contenders that could use a player that brings all of the different weapons that Vucevic does. And I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how the deadline's going to play out, obviously. But he's going to be a guy who's, I guarantee you, his name is brought up all day long leading up to the deadline.
Coach, Dwayne Casey may not still be in Toronto. He's in Detroit, but the imprints are there. One of the big ones, all those minutes in the trust he gave Pascal Siakam a year ago, that has now led him to this version. Why should he be an all-star? How impressed have you been with the growth you've seen, Coach, here this season from him?
The way he's played, besides Lowry, to me, taking a step back early in the year to let the new guys, Kawhi coming in, the growth of Siakam. And this young man hasn't stopped. He has been consistent from the beginning. Obviously, they've been right at the top of the league as far as record goes. And I think he has such tremendous upside because he just doesn't do it on one end of the floor. He's capable of being one of those two-way players. He gets a whole lot done.
All right, we've been getting a lot done with your help. GMs and coaches set it up. You have been able to put it through the perfect player. But how about the prettiest jump shot? Chances are that man has a good shot. We'll find out how it ended up when we come back. February the 5th. Every year, a good year to talk about the rising stars. Of course, all the action on our air on TNT as we get a chance to look at the list for the U.S. And we've got stars aplenty, including a guy, and I heard it mentioned before on Crunch Time, I think Jared had mentioned it. Look, De'Aaron Fox got to be as improved as anybody in the league. A lot of guys that fit that category. We'll get into that in a second. Here are the others on the list. How about 19 years of age? Jaren Jackson Jr., John Collins himself, who's improved. Lonzo Ball, talked about a lot. And maybe Jarrett Allen, not enough for what he's done to improve his game under Kenny Atkinson. I want to start with Fox because, Sekou, we knew about the speed. We knew about the mind and the makeup, which was there, and the work ethic. And it kind of told you the game would get better. What has impressed you most here in year two from Fox?
I think the leadership, has been something that's really stood out about Fox, and also the tentativeness on defense. I wasn't sure he would become the defensive-minded player that he is so early in his career. When you hit a guy who can do all the things he can physically, to focus on the defensive end, in addition to pushing the pace, leading this Kings team during what's really been a revival season for them, Casey. To have those as your principles as a young player is really impressive. We don't talk about De'Aaron Fox enough, if you ask me, given the jump in his play that we've seen and what I think is an unlimited potential in terms of what he can become.
Coach, here in Atlanta, they talk about Trae Young a lot for obvious reasons, and including the choice that they made versus where they were with Doncic. Hasn't been perfect, but I know Lloyd Pierce and that staff happy with the shot selection. Again, not exactly perfect yet, but what have you seen improvement-wise? What do you like about Trae Young so far?
I like him a little bit to Baker Mayfield, the quarterback with the Cleveland Browns, because a chip on their shoulder coming in, size-wise, not what the norm is in their positions, but they come in and they command the respect of their teammates. 27 points a game in college for Trae Young. He's over 16 points a game now, not shooting the ball as well with range as he did, but that'll get better as he goes on and figures out the defenders. What I like is I didn't understand his ability to see the entire floor and make plays that I've seen him make to help his teammates become better and help win games. I'm impressed with this young man.
Something big on Trae for those who have not watched him, how often he drives and how efficiently in today's day and age. The only two who have driven more per game so far this season to the basket, Harden, DeRozan. And then it's Trae Young in that 3 spot. Thank you to all the analytics from David Griffin. All right, let's get to the world side. I stole that one. We give you this. The lineup on the world end of things, as we look at their roster, you see Ben Simmons. He clearly could end up in the All-Star game as well. So could Doncic, DeAndre Ayton, who has not been talked about a lot, maybe because of Luka. Lauri Markkanen, his continued success. Bogey out on the end as well. And this group, including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Clippers, OG up in Toronto, and how about Cedi Osman?
That's a good group.
How about Cedi Osman? Because, look, Coach, and you get to see him a lot, obviously. This was a guy who, I think it should say something how much LeBron seemed to really enjoy playing with him and want him out on the floor. Not a lot of people even knew who he was before that, but he's taken now with these minutes his game to another level this year.
The players on the team love him. He's a fun guy. He's a keep it loose guy, but he's a guy who has a great work ethic, guy who plays hard. In fact, he played almost a little bit too hard and out of control early on, knowing that he was coming in replacing the small forward position, who was LeBron James. But since the beginning of the season, he's settled back down. He's taken a shot with more confidence. Early on, it was just 3-ball after 3-ball, and he was rushing it to get it out of his hands. Now he's more aggressive, taking it to the basket, putting it on the floor. He's a good defender. And I mentioned he's fearless. I mean, he's very, very aggressive at both ends of the floor. You got to like the improvement in Osman.
Well, I won't take this aggressively. I'm improving at it. But Rodion's Karooks.
That's
right. That, see, that was good, right? You look at all of the different guys that Kenny uses and how many they can trust. And that culture, which you know, Coach, as well as anybody, presents that. But what are people who are not paying attention to this talent in Brooklyn missing so far about what you're seeing?
They're missing one of the steals of the 2018 draft is what they're missing. This is a guy whose versatility, and we don't have utility players in this league, Coach, the way we used to, where that was a valued skill. Now, everybody has to be a shooter. You know, the number one priority is finding guys who can stretch the floor and knock down shots. This is a guy who has a skill set, really, that is a throwback. A guy who can run the floor, find, you know, spaces on offense and get shots, get buckets without you ever running a play for him. He's an athletic, you know, wing defender, which is at a premium always in this league. And when you factor in on a team like Brooklyn, where they have so many different players really at his same position, the fact that you can play him up and really play him as a 4 sometimes in a smaller lineup, to me, bodes well for Karooks, because as this Brooklyn core grows, you're going to need somebody who can fill in the gaps. And this is one of those guys who I think is going to be a perfect fit.
Sounds to me like you were describing John Havlicek. Is that going too far back?
I don't know, but I just think you got to give Sean Marks and his staff a ton of credit for identifying a guy who fits perfectly into what they're doing and then accelerating his process and getting them in the mix right away.
Another smart player, and on that side, you talk about Doncic and Osman, all of these guys, great basketball IQ. That the rising stars, but what about the All-Stars? Somebody's going to get snubbed somewhere. Will the Spider go, or perhaps Rudy instead? Simmons playing both games, and spoiler alert, Russ, he'll be there.